Observing 50 Years of Gym Evolution by Tommy Suggs, October 26, 2010. I was home for Christmas vacation from the University of Texas. It was 1956, and my weight training had moved from conditioning and bodybuilding to competitive Olympic lifting. My home was on the Texas coast, Lake Jackson, and there was not an Olympic bar in the country. Houston, 60 miles away, offered my best hope for finding a place to train during my 2 weeks at home for the holidays. After examining the Houston Yellow Pages, I found one gym listed. A call to the gym revealed that they had no heavy weights and just stressed light barbell movement for toning up the muscles. In fact, it was necessary for me to explain what was meant by Olympic bar, lifting platform, and squat rack. The Southwest YMCA ended up providing the equipment I needed to train. The weight room was a dungeon, but it had all that was needed for me to get in a good workout. And that was the way it was in the gym business in those days. Gyms could be classified as key clubs, where members chipped in to buy the equipment, shared the overhead expenses, and all carried a key. And commercial gyms where they were open to the public. It will be hard for younger readers who are acquainted with the mega gyms with all the machines, free weights, and cardio machines to visualize the gym of the 50s and 60s. To help readers under 50 get a visual picture of a typical gym of the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, I will describe their appearance, building and equipment-wise, and how they were managed. While I was a senior in high school, 1954, I heard about a gym in the nearby city of Baytown. I still remember standing outside and surveying with excitement my first gym. It was an old storefront building, and it fit in the not new or glamorous category. Inside was small and drab. This was Otto Ziegler's gym. Otto was a dedicated weightlifting enthusiast, and his desire to have a place to train and spread the word about the many benefits of weight training was the motivation behind this establishment. His gym was Olympic and powerlifting oriented. There was a platform, a couple of Olympic sets, squat racks, etc. The fact is that there was everything a person needed in the way of equipment to reach national levels of lifting proficiency. There is much talk about the renaissance of weightlifting during the late 50s and throughout the 60s. Those lifters and bodybuilders came out of gyms like Otto's. Hard work and basic equipment is all it takes. Training in a gym that looks like the lobby of an expensive hotel doesn't help one bit. Training partners with like interests and enthusiasm is almost as important as equipment. Otto's was a commercial gym, and Otto took an active part in coaching and providing training programs. This brings up another important point about gyms of those bygone days. Some gyms provided instruction and some provided only training facilities. As I describe the various gyms visited during these years, the 50s and 60s, mention will often be made regarding the instruction available and the quality of that instruction. In the spring of 1956, I visited Leo Murdoch's gym in Austin, Texas. Leo was from New York City and had a background in wrestling and boxing in addition to his knowledge of weight training. He would provide instruction if you asked for assistance or a training routine. Of course, my thought was that he couldn't possibly know as much as an advanced lifter like me. I finally broke down and asked him to write me out a press routine. This he did, and I followed it for several weeks. The routine was based upon what I now realize was a standard rep system that encompassed the idea of light, medium, and heavy training days. I made good progress, but just couldn't cope with the light and medium days. Finally, I got tired of hearing my training partners ask on my light day, "You mean you aren't going to do a couple more reps with that weight?" In those days, if you didn't go to failure, you weren't training hard enough. I returned to training hard, and as might be expected, my presses soon hit a wall. Leo's first gym was a large old house converted into a gym. There were a few exercise weights, a snatch rack, and bench. Within a year or so, he had built a well-equipped gym. Well-equipped in those days was a lifting platform, squat racks, a rack of dumbbells and barbells, incline and decline benches, lat pull, dip bars, a chinning bar, toe raise machine, and leg extension curl machine. Not much else is needed, but by today's standards, it would get a failing score. Prospective trainees these days would be sure to ask, where are the machines? Then add, no machines, how do you expect me to look like Mr. Universe? Is there a month without machines? How do you expect me to look like Mr. Universe in a month without machines? This is a good place to talk about the attitudes of the public toward weight training. Here, 3 different categories of attitudes emerge for consideration. One is the attitude towards training with weights in general. For instance, the trainer at my high school informed me that I should stop training with weights as it would make my muscles tight and ill-coordinated. I assured him that I would never touch another weight. That weekend, I followed my usual workout in my garage gym. But there is justice in this world. Years later, the same trainer was hired by the Houston Oilers. At his suggestion, I was hired to be their strength coach. The second consideration is the public's desire to get in shape, but to not be muscle-bound, like a Mr. America, or huge, like the heavyweight Olympic lifters, who are only ones ever shown on TV. Leo sold his gym within a few years to Jack Woodson. When Leo owned it, he catered to businessmen who wanted to get in shape and students who wanted to add a little muscle so they would look good at the local swimming hole, Barton Springs. In fact, he constructed a platform outside under an awning for the fellow lifters who wanted to do the Olympic lifts because of his concern that the heavy lifting might make a bad impression on his regular clientele. That all changed when Jack Woodson took over ownership. The Texas Athletic Club, as it was named, became known as a place to train if you wanted to get big and strong, and weak sisters really were discouraged from joining. In those days, you had to train in whatever gym was available. Very seldom did you have a choice. Remember, only one gym was listed in Houston during the 50s. I am sure there were more, but they were evidently limited in scope. They were usually owned by an overenthusiastic husband with visions of being a world beater, willing to lose money in the gym because he wanted a place to train. In any event, the owner usually determined the type of training that would be encouraged in his gym. The final attitude involves women. Co-ed training did not exist in any of the gyms of that era that I know of. Women were not allowed to train at the TAC. Other gyms had the same policy. One reason was that social mores didn't encourage male and female mixing in what was considered a male activity. There were a very few small exercise facilities available for women only. This usually consisted of an exercise class in a woman's home or a small building with very little equipment. The other disadvantage is that having the facility co-ed would mean the extra expense of having 2 dressing and shower areas. The gyms that did allow both men and women to train divided the training days so that women trained certain days and men trained the other. In the early 70s, my gym allowed women to train Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and men trained on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. I will discuss more about my gym later. While attending the University of Texas, my training was divided between the Texas Athletic Club and the gym on campus. Finally, most of my time was spent training at the university gym where other lifters trained on the Olympic lifts, and the lifting team slowly came into existence. My first training session in the UT gym was like heaven to me. It was a large room where weightlifting classes were held. Across the end of the room was a lifting platform. There were 6 or 7 Olympic bars that were so old and used that the knurling was almost smooth. Most of them were bent. There was a wooden squat rack, a lat machine, and several chinning bars. This was a gym that would be considered sparse by today's standards, but appeared extravagant for someone who had been training on an exercise bar in a garage. A few years later, a few new bars were added, along with a platform that covered the whole floor, complete with a power rack made from 4x4s. It was during my first visit to the UT gym in 1954 that I, in person, observed a lifter doing an Olympic lift. It was the beginning of a long journey that would take a book to describe. When I moved to York in 1963 to train with Olympic coach Bob Hoffman at the famous York Barbell Gym, my training facilities changed little. It was a large room with 2 platforms complete with Olympic bars, lots of plates, a power rack, an iron staircase for squatting, a leg press, a lat machine, a rack full of dumbbells, and several flat and incline benches. The York gym didn't need more equipment, as it had the most important of all the ingredients necessary for becoming a champion, the X Factor. Again, the X Factor is a story itself and would take up considerable space to discuss. In brief, the X Factor is a combination of individual enthusiasm, an attitude of succeeding no matter what it takes, and a huge ego with all of the above bouncing off each other. It was individuals generating dynamic energy that spawned winners. There have been gyms since then, there are gyms now, and there will be gyms like this in the future. Serious lifters find them, and their energy just adds to that which is already there. If you're a serious lifter, find one. Enough said. It was my honor to lift on the York team and serve as managing editor of Strength and Health magazine. This gave me a chance to visit many gyms. Not much changed when I spent a couple of weeks in Los Angeles training in some of the more famous gyms of that day. The only thing that changed was that some gyms were going uptown. That is to say, the only difference between the plain vanilla and Spartan appearance of the usual gym and that of the new breed of gyms was the freshly painted walls, carpeted floor, and the same equipment, but chrome and in a spacious building. They cost more to join, but the average person felt more comfortable in this pleasant environment. Many ordinary citizens started being concerned about their level of fitness for the first time.